Guys, this is the last um, video that I'm going to be doing regarding writing your actual essay. Okay, so this is all about conclusions. Remember that the goal of your conclusion is not to introduce any new information. Okay, so that means that there should be nothing in your conclusion that wasn't already written in your paper. There should also be no direct quotes, paraphrases, or in-text citations. So that means that we shouldn't see parentheses, we shouldn't see quotation marks anywhere. This is probably one of the most important things and the area where people wind up getting themselves in trouble. This idea that your introduction is not a copy and paste situation of your conclusion, okay? There are different ideas, they serve different purposes. But then again, you also want to remember that you're not going to include your first and second person pronouns. You're going to focus on more nouns than pronouns. So if we scroll down and take a look at the first sample conclusion, there are 3 parts that need to be in all of your conclusions. The first one is to restate your thesis statement. Again, this is not a copy and paste. Okay, you need to say the same thing, but you need to use different words. Okay, then you're going to summarize your big ideas and you're going to leave the reader with an interesting final thought. This I'm going to talk about later, but you can refer to the chart below if you need further reference. So if you take a look at my example here, this example conclusion models the idea that we start with the restatement of our thesis, and then as we go further down, we get more broad. So that means that this is all about our big ideas, and then lastly, what's underlined is our final thought. So this example is going to mirror the first example on the introduction page. So if we take a look at in the midst of the new century, the American personality hardened to reflect a new level of distrust of government policy and skepticism of the larger-than-life sports hero christened in past decades. So if you look at your introduction paper that we gave you yesterday, you should see that my thesis statement focuses on both government policy and sports. Okay, I used the same 2 topics in my restatement of my thesis. Then I also use the same adjectives, the same feelings: skepticism and distrust. Okay, but notice that the rest of the sentence does not look like my thesis statement. Just by changing the words during the 1950s to throughout the 1950s is not a restatement of your thesis. So again, I'm going to look through the rest of my paragraph and take note of the big ideas that I mentioned in my introduction. So I mentioned September 11th and other terrorist attacks. I mentioned this idea of privacy, of going to war with Iraq. Then I talk about steroid use in baseball, concussion research in the NFL, and this idea about pro athletes disrespecting women. Okay? So again, I'm touching on these as review. I'm not presenting any new information. Then, if you take a look at the second to last sentence here, as the confetti fell from the air, this is a reference to when I was talking about the ball dropping during the introduction from sample 1 yesterday. Okay, then we're going to end on our Why don't they have any more light colors? Then we're going to end with the new century starting off with a bang. However, the oblivious crowd was headed towards pessimistic outlook. So this right here is about looking towards the future. Okay? So if you take a look here, this is the second sample conclusion that again goes in line with the sample introduction from yesterday. Okay, so quickly we talk about government and fads. Okay, and in this case, I used the synonym for pessimism as negativity, but I'm still talking about the same ideas. So then I go through and I talk about Bush becoming president. I talk about 9/11. I talk about FEMA, the stock market crash. Then regarding fads, I reference social networking and iPods. Okay? So then my last sentence here is going to be again focusing on what the future is going to hold. And this is actually a direct reference to when I mention Obama in the introduction. So if I scroll down here, these are going to be your 4 options that you're going to use. So option 1 is to answer the question, why should we care? Why should we care about fashion in the 70s? Why should I care about the atomic bomb dropping on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Why do labor unions matter? Your second option can be a return to a theme, idea, question from the introduction. So if you start with a question, this is going to be the good spot to make sure that you answer it. The other example is this idea. Okay, in my example, I talked about the ball dropping on New Year's Eve in my introduction, and then I brought it full circle with the confetti and fireworks and Y2K in my conclusion. This example relates to the sample from yesterday where I said that the decade was very turbulent. I am taking that idea and equating that with the turbulence of an airplane flying through a major storm. Your third option is to make a connection to the future of America. Okay, what about something that happened in your decade is present today? Okay, how is what you're researching connected to today? What was the point of scientific inventions and discoveries in the future, in your decade, and what do they have to do with today? So the last option is what has been influenced by your topic and decade. So what do we do today that is sort of influenced or as a result of your decade? Okay, so how are musicians today impacted by people like Michael Jackson and Prince and Madonna? How is fashion today impacted by the 1900s? How is food today influenced by immigrants coming to this country in the early 1900s? Okay, so hopefully this helps you with your conclusion. If you have any questions, don't forget to talk to your teacher.